Yeah, we had a lot of no's. I'm not even gonna front. Like, we had a lot of no's and we had a lot of unanswered emails, which were obviously no's, which it takes resilience to be a founder of anything. But it also takes, I think, an additional layer of resilience and extra thick skin when you're doing something that like doesn't quite exist in the way in which you imagine it, because it seems even more impossible to people because it just is not a thing yet.
Hi, and welcome back to Shelf Talks. I'm your host, Roberta, and today we have with us the beautiful Brianna Arps, founder of Moodeaux, an 8 times award winning luxury fragrance brand, gracing our Instagram feeds and on the shelves of some notable retail stores. And just this week, gaining her first Forbes feature in the holiday gift guide 20 Black owned beauty brands to shop. So, congratulations on that.
You. I'm so honored to be here. What a joy and delight. I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be fun too. So let's start before Moodeaux ever kind of existed. Can you just give us kind of background on what you were doing, what was fulfilling you, and then kind of what led you to start the brand?
Yeah, that is a great question. I always tell people that I am an accidental entrepreneur and that I never once thought that I would be doing any of this at all. I'm a former full-time beauty, fashion, and lifestyle editor. So I thought that I was going to be writing about brands for the rest of my life, let alone launching my own, right? So I would say like the catalyst for Moodeaux came about in 2018. I lost my job and I was what, 23 or 24 at that time, which losing my job like threw me into an existential crisis. Like I thought the world was going to end. I thought I literally didn't know what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I think anyone who's experienced whether it's being laid off or losing their job or losing any kind of like source of income, they know like how traumatizing that could be, and how stifling it could be in terms of like figuring out what your next steps are. But something that helped me figure out my next steps was finding joy and solace in the everyday notion of going through my beauty routine, right? Like on those days where you're like, wow, I have no job, and you're laying in a bed and you're like, how am I going to figure out what to do next? Just the idea of like getting up, taking a shower, putting on makeup, putting on red lipstick, or in our case, wearing fragrance, that was enough to kind of pull me out of the depths of that depression that I felt at that time. And I really leaned into my background, which is in journalism and media, and started doing a lot of research as to like why is it that I feel really good when I wear fragrance, or why is it that I think that the best compliment is like you smell good, right? Why is that a thing? So I did a lot of research and just really came across the fact that like one, there are just not a lot of Black owned fragrance labels being thrust into the mainstream like our counterparts. Or like there's just not a lot of us who are highly visible on some of the world's most premier shelves. The Sephoras, the Neiman's, the Nordstroms, the Saxes of the world. And just like noticing that void in the market, then having being laid off, but then having also found solace in fragrance, I think it formed what I'd like to call like a perfect storm, right? Where I'm like, wow, I think I'm being positioned and primed and prepped for this opportunity. And I jumped and I said, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do to start, but I'm going to start. And what was it, like 3 years after that, we launched officially. So it took us 3 years to get to launch, 3 long, crazy years, but we finally made it, and I think that we're doing well, I think.
No, that's amazing. So had fragrance always been kind of your comfort zone and prior to kind of the layoff, or did you just really discover it during that time that you were trying to figure out like next steps in your life?
So I love fragrance. I've always loved fragrance. It really started, the affinity for it really started from my mom and my grandma, who I like to say are like the best smelling women in my life. And I was that curious, like nosy kid who would always be caught like playing around at their beauty stations, whether it was like mixing things, like mixing different fragrances together, or just like being grown, right? Like I always was caught acting grown. And my grandma actually nurtured that interest. And I think like that's what caregivers do in terms of like raising kids. They see that their children or their grandchildren or whatever are interested in something and they nurture that interest. And that's
Yeah.
what my grandma did. So instead of like scolding me, she was like, "Hey, let's go down to Macy's. Let's go down and pick out some things that like maybe aren't as grown." Cause like I was dabbling in Dior, like chill sis, like that aren't that grown, but that helped me feel like I had autonomy at such a young age and developing my own ideals around self-care. So I really credit it to my mom and my grandma. But fast forward, like graduating with my journalism degree and starting my career in media, like there's this like like it's like, is it an unknown secret now? I don't even know if it's unknown, but there's this thing called the free table in media. And I was the one who was collecting the fragrances on the free table. So I've always loved it from my mom and my grandma, but having been exposed to so many different brands and products over the years in my editorial career, I was collecting these bottles that were on the free table like infinity stones. Like I just loved fragrance. So like maybe it's one of those things where I think life was dropping Easter eggs throughout different points in my life. And it finally culminated in me deciding, like, hey, I think you have a future in this. So I would say a little bit of both, like my family life, but also my career and being kind of awakened to that this could be a career opportunity for me if I let it.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like definitely was something that from a childhood was there and then maybe laid dormant for a period and then kind of reemerged in a way that made sense to kind of create your future. So what were next steps for you in creating the brand?
Yeah, like I think like looking back at it, I was in survival mode. And the beautiful part about having cultivated such deep relationships as a former journalist, I wasn't necessarily starting from ground zero in that I had no one to talk to. I did have a network of beauty founders, albeit they weren't fragrance beauty founders, but they were beauty founders who I could tap into and learn from and reach out to and say like, "Hey, like what were some of the earlier steps in your journey? Like what was step 1 for you?" And I actually went into beauty marketing consulting after my career in editorial. So I didn't just jump right into Moodeaux like full time, like working on it diligently for 3 years. I became extra resourceful in leveraging my network to work for some of these really established beauty brands to kind of get an understanding from the inside out, like how do y'all function, what is necessary. So I worked for some beauty brands, some really cool ones, became mentored by some really amazing founders while also just enrolling in YouTube University, right? There's a lot of free information online and I spent a lot of time figuring out things from the internet. I enrolled in the School for Aromatic Studies. They had like a free intro to aromatherapy course that like I studied and used and leveraged as my Bible. So I think like in totality, it's just like leveraging whatever was at my disposal while also practicing true, like, how do I want to say it? Like leveraging and practicing like grit and being like not afraid to hear no. I like cold emailed so many people, cold called so many fragrance houses and manufacturers, and they're like, "Kid, what are you talking about? Like, we don't know who you are. You have no digital footprint in this space." And, spend a lot of time over those 3 years working for people, but also like trying to get people to take a chance on me. And so it all materialized in a way where ultimately I was able to work full time for myself and gain great partners who were ready to build Moodeaux with me.
I think that's great and something to just reflect on the fact that you determined you wanted to do this, but then didn't just say, let me start it tomorrow without really knowing how to and kind of flailing around to figure it out, but utilizing time to get with the right people, to understand the business and what, success would look like and learning through platforms that are free and or, connecting with people. So I think that's a good note for people to just take back too, is that you did some work in really understanding what this space meant and what you wanted to be in regards to, a partner in it.
Yeah, like honestly, like I remember telling my mom and the partner that I was dating at the time, they were the first two people that I told that I wanted to launch a fragrance label. Both of them were like, "Okay, great. support you, but I remember my mom in particular just being like, okay, bet. Like we can get on Alibaba, we can get packaging from the and like she was like ready to like help me figure and I'm like, girl, no, we're not Alibaba-ing nothing. Like we're not doing that. And no shade to anyone who starts that way. No shade to anyone who leverages like wholesale networks to build a product. Like that's fine. But for me, like since day one, the intention was that if I'm going to do it, I want to become a master of it and learning and respecting it, respecting the trade. Perfumery is an ancient art form. And the perfumers who are tasked with creating today's products are artisans. And so, like for us, it felt like a slap to them, a slap in the face to them if I just were to just use this as a
Mhm.
cash grab. And it never was that. It for me, it was like I really respect this art form. I really understand the depth and breadth of how it can enhance someone's sense of well-being, and I want to do it the right way and do it in a way where we will be primed for retail success because we took the time to understand, but also took the time to build a really compelling brand and leverage like aesthetics and things like that that we knew retailers would be interested in from the jump. So no shade to the Alibaba folks or anyone like that, but like yeah, like it was an intentional act from day one. And it's paid off, I think.
Yeah. No, that's great. And agree. I mean, everybody has a different path, right, in regards to how they want to build a brand. So then, at that 3 year mark, or even in between it, while you're saying you were calling, cold calling to try to get people to kind of get on board, did someone finally say yes, or how did that connection work in regard to actually being able to kind of get some movement and get some momentum going?
Yeah, we had a lot of no's. I'm not even gonna front. Like we had a lot of no's and we had a lot of unanswered emails, which were obviously no's, which it takes resilience to be a founder of anything. But it also takes, I think, an additional layer of resilience and extra thick skin when you're doing something that like doesn't quite exist in the way in which you imagine it, because it seems even more impossible to people because it just is not a thing yet. So we knew that when we launched in the market that we wanted to create an oil-based product that really functioned like a fragrance primer that helped to prepare the skin for fragrance longevity. Like we wanted to do something different. We didn't want to just call it an oil perfume. We wanted to do something that was fairly, really special. And the fragrance houses that we were talking to originally, they were like, yeah, what? What does this even mean? Like, we don't even know if we have the technology to manufacture something like this. But I did find some really, really early partners who were willing to listen. And I think once they got on the phone with me, or like I had the chance to like Zoom or whatever with them, they understood that I was really passionate about it and really serious, because for them to take a bet on us, it's really expensive because they're like creating products for us like off the bat and hoping that we have the money to pay for them, right? So it's time, energy, resources that they're expending without ever seeing a dollar on the front end, right? So, we finally found some really good partners from the like fragrance manufacturing perspective. Found a great guy who was out in Brooklyn who I was like, listen, I just want to create a few hundred units. He had a small like print shop who like he like screen printed glass, and I was like, if I can get you the glass, can you just like screen print a few hundred units for me? How can we make this work? So when I talk about being scrappy, we were extra scrappy, really, really scrappy. And I think it's important for founders to consider that and to consider their cash resources, because until you have established product market fit and finding the right people who can help you establish product market fit, you're going to just be wasting money. So early partners, really important. And I will say, like, we're really excited because we work with a handful of them still today. So partnership is really important. And I kind of want to say, like, prior to talking about partners, I want to acknowledge the fact that, like, just like so many other Black women owned businesses, we did start in the kitchen first. But I realized that my strengths are not in the kitchen formulating nothing, right? Like, I am a fragrance designer. I am a fragrance designer by heart. Like, I know what I want things to be. But I want to also underscore the importance of me acknowledging that that particular pathway is a pathway that works for some, but not for all.
Mm, yeah,
And that
yeah.
even though I immediately wanted to find a partner to work with on a larger scale, like that didn't invalidate my journey. I had already put my own form of sweat equity into building the brand, and that I didn't need to adopt someone else's formula to success, that I could really create my own. And I also want to, hopefully someone hears that and takes it in stride.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely important to leverage what you know are your true strengths, right? And to your point, you don't have to go the path of everybody else. So, but you actually did start in the kitchen and were like mixing up
Yes.
some.
Listen, let me tell you something. Aside from calling my mama and talking to my partner, the second thing I did was go to Whole Foods. Shout outs to Whole Foods. That was like the second thing I did. I like walked my little happy tail down to Whole Foods. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, so I walked everywhere. And I remember just like parking myself in their like beauty aisle, and they have like a essential oils aisle, and they have like roll-on fragrances and all that. They had an aisle dedicated to that. And I just remember like putting just a whole bunch of like essential oils in my little basket, checking out, going home, and like putting things together. And I'm like, "Ooh, okay, that kind of smells good. That kind of smells good." And I'm like, okay. But again, quickly realized that that's not my ministry. And that wasn't the way in which I wanted to build Moodeaux, and it all worked out. So I think
Yeah.
it's funny now. I look back at it and I'm just like, it's funny. It's funny to like have that part of my story. But it was important. It was important for me to go through that and like play kitchen cosmetic person, um, to get to where we are. I think it was necessary.
Yeah. And to try it and immediately say, this is not it. Let me try it a different way instead of trying to figure it out because you hear other people, that's how they start. So this has to be the way in order for me to gain
Yes.
success. Yeah.
And you know why that is like often our first inclination? It really boils down to access to not only just resources, opportunities and funding, access to education. Like when I was in school, when I was in high school, and everyone has that conversation with their guidance counselor before they graduate because it's like, I guess, required by law in a lot of states. And they sit down and they look at all your grades and they're like, you really excel in this area, in this area, in this area. We think that you should pursue this career, right? It's a very standardized approach to moving kids through the educational system. But in no way, shape, or form was I ever introduced to the fact that by learning chemistry in high school, that one day perhaps I could become a cosmetic chemist. And perhaps becoming a cosmetic chemist would turn me into a perfumer, and a perfumer into a fragrance owner, a fragrance brand owner. Like, we don't have that pipeline. So again, like, no shade to anyone who starts in the kitchen, because we don't have the same luxury of seeing from an earlier age that like we could do these things in a different way. And so what do? We just leverage
Yeah.
what we have. We leverage our immediate resources to do it. So I think like there's a lot to be said about like entrepreneurship, and like you cannot talk about Black women entrepreneurs without talking about like the lack of access that we have. And it's not just in one particular way, but it's across the board.
Yeah, no, agreed with that. And it's what you were doing. Like it's literally going out and trying to figure it out and trying to gain the access and getting the information different than most. So I applaud you for even doing that and being able to kind of execute in a way outside of what, we typically think is the way to go and being able to find success in that. So you found someone to kind of create the fragrance. Did you come up with the kind of makeup of what the fragrance was going to be? Did you work with them? Like how did that happen?
Yeah, I think like the funnest part of my job is like the days when I can sit down and I can just dream. And I loved that in the earlier stages I had infinite amount of time to just dream because we weren't a thing yet. But like it always starts with us like, what mood do we want to encapsulate in a fragrance? Because our emotions as like people, that's what bonds us. Like that is like a singular thread throughout the entire human experience, is like feelings and emotions. Like I may not look like you may not have the same background as me or whatever, but like we all want to feel worthy, right? We all want to feel worthy of creating the lives of our dreams. we all sometimes feel like a punk star, meaning we all feel like we want to be that girl. We want to show off. We want to flaunt, you know what I'm saying? We all have that emotion. Or
Right.
we all feel brand new in a sense where we're ready to turn over a new leaf and feel as though we're becoming the people that we want to be, right? Like those human emotions and moods and feelings like bond us. And so when I'm designing a fragrance, I'm really truly thinking about how we can incorporate fragrance notes and accords that emulate those emotions, and help people kind of find themselves within the fragrance. And earlier in my journey, when we came up with Worthy, which was our first scent, that was such a personal fragrance for me, because I wasn't feeling worthy, right? I had lost my job. I decided to be a crazy perfume lady. I decided to liquidate my 401k and all my savings accounts. I was living on New York State unemployment because I didn't have a job. I was crazy. I was delusional, but I also wanted to feel like all of this was worth it. So we created that fragrance very to be personal, but we're happy that it's become a bestseller for us because again, at the end of the day, we all want to feel worthy. So in translating those like feelings and emotions to our fragrance houses and our fragrance manufacturers, like I design briefs, like very detailed briefs. Like I'm literally using my journalism background and crafting a beautifully written story that then someone needs to read and figure out how to translate into an actual fragrance. I often tell them the notes and accords I want to include, sure, but they also have the ability to exercise creative freedom and perhaps presenting me with things that I wasn't thinking about. So it's a really truly collaborative process with our fragrance houses and our perfumers and our manufacturers. But it all starts from a brief from us internally. It all starts from my brain. It all starts from like things that I'm inspired by. It's an art form, like it's art. So I think that that also helps us stand apart. Whereas like traditional fragrance marketing is like weird and like you might watch a fragrance commercial and you might leave it thinking like, well, what does this even smell like? Like, or how does this relate to me? I don't understand. We're trying to be the opposite of that and infuse intentionality and purpose in everything that we do. And it all starts from up here.
It's really interesting because I of course see it from your social play in regards to the connection of feeling to everything and the emotion, which I think makes you a differentiator, of course, in the set. I just wrote down a couple of things that I've read, like "Summertime in a Bottle," "A Hug in a
Yeah.
Bottle," "Brand that smells like happiness." So it's interesting to hear, and I think it's great for everyone to hear how it doesn't start from the marketing campaign. It literally starts from the idea of what that specific SKU and scent is going to be. It's already created before even things are mixed together and then kind of, passes through for all the way until it kind of ends up on shelf. So that's really interesting. And I think definitely just gives more like that value and like connection, I guess I should say,
I do, and I really appreciate you noticing that, and I appreciate our audience and our community for also noticing that same intention because we all know, maybe we all don't know, but like if you're in the industry, like how fragrance works is that oftentimes brands will create flankers, meaning they'll create a scent that does exceptionally well. And because their goal is sales oriented, they'll then just reiterate that same scent 1,000 times and just call it something different and maybe add a few more notes to it that changes perhaps the story a little bit. But like that approach is very sales driven. That's like, hey, we know that X, Y, and Z works for us. We have a bottom line to meet. Let's just make some other iteration of it and it'll also perform well. And that's fine and dandy, but that's soulless. That's very
Mhm.
soulless, and it becomes really hard to tell a true honest story when your product was created without a soul. And so we're kind of like taking a risk in that way and designing based on like feelings and emotions that are true, but that risk has paid off, and that I think today's consumer is smart about how they view brands, but also smart in how they want to spend their money. And
Mhm.
perhaps it's a long game for us, but we know that we're in the right game doing it that way.
Yeah. And I think, by having that connection of kind of feeling and emotion just helps to build what you've already, kind of established a really strong community, but people really believe and value your brand, right? And understand and know that it's not just putting another scent on the shelf for sales, but it really is about wanting other people to feel good in all of the ways that you're kind of evoking. So that's amazing. So you're able to find manufacturing house, and then you got somebody to be able to do the glass bottles and print your brand name, have your kind of first 100 bottles. How are you selling them? Like, what are the ways in which you're first trying to get consumers out there?
Yeah, let me tell you, that was scary. That was scary because having a fragrance brand, we have the very unique challenge of like you cannot smell us through a screen, right? Like we really have to double down on our product storytelling, our brand storytelling. Like we really have to be convincing in how we're showcasing ourselves. And I think like having the background that I have, which is in media and in storytelling, I think that afforded me with the confidence to believe in myself that like Brianna, you can tell this story of this brand and you can convince somebody to take a chance on it. But baked into our strategy, I will say, like, because it took us 3 years to launch, I was really adamant about taking our community on the journey with us, which our community was like my personal social following to start. Whereas, like, literally, like every day on Instagram stories and sometimes on my feed, I would just share updates or ask for their opinion or ask them to conduct or take surveys that we've conducted or ask our community to share what colors they like or do you like this bottle or that bottle. Like we really were intentional about talking to people because I think like people get scared and they don't want to share anything until it's done, but by that point you have missed the opportunity to enhance what you've already done. You've missed the opportunity to fix something that needs fixing. You've missed the opportunity to involve people who are going to be your first customers into the very important process that is developing the brand and the product. Like you've missed that opportunity. And in doing that, that's an ego-driven way to build a brand. So we decided like let's just open up our kitchen. Let's just make this thing public. And by the time we launched, we had so many people who felt as though Moodeaux was theirs just as much as it is mine and our teams that we had a great first sales day. Like I remember launching the site and I was late. I told these people one time and I was like maybe 5 minutes late. By the time I clicked go on that thing, orders flooded in because people were in the queue. They were waiting. And mind you, this was on a pre-order at that. That was this we launched on a pre-order at that, but we had so many people flood our site to shop because they felt strongly about what we were doing. Like they didn't even care that they hadn't smelt it yet. They just cared that they had saw somebody who has passion and who has determination and grit and the will to figure it out. Like they wanted to support. And those early sales drove the business for quite some time. Those early customers became our loyalists. They became our evangelists. They became the people who were online talking about us, who then captured more people. So it was like a beautiful snowball effect that wouldn't have occurred if I wasn't vulnerable and transparent from day one. So it was a long, like I said, we're in the long game. Like this was a long journey to launch. It was a long journey to product development. It was a long journey to launching our second scent and our third scent. But I think it's okay for you to take your time. And it's okay for you to let people know what's going on behind the scenes. I think those are like the biggest lessons I learned from those days.
Yeah, open up the curtains and let people see, right? And I think to what you're saying too, it allows those people that were waiting for you to, to be able to do that pre-order felt that they were along the journey in creating the brand, so they wanted to see what the what the outcome
Yes.
was because they were
Yes.
they were they were picking out all of the things to
Listen,
put it
take
together.
my
They're like, "Where's
money.
all this
Take
hard
my
work?"
money. Listen, take the money. Take the money. Take the money. And it's crazy because we launched 3 years after the idea came to be. But I'll say if I hadn't lost my grandfather, we probably would have stalled a little bit more. Because it truly took about a year and a half to get everything in place. But another year and a half was me trying to overcome doubt. Like, oh, it's not perfect yet, or oh, it's not whatever. Like it took me a while to like push go, but I lost my grandfather. I lost my grandfather very, 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 very suddenly. And he he was my world, right? And when I lost him, I was like, you cannot wait anymore. Things could be here today and literally gone tomorrow. And what are you waiting on truly? Like, what is the thing that is actually truly holding you back? And I just say, you know what? October 1st it is. And we just launched it, right? And I think that is also something that I often reflect on because like perfection is a facade. The biggest part about launching a brand, especially like launching a brand that you want eventually to be in retail, is that you have to just go. You have to just press go on that thing. Trust yourself. And the beautiful thing about startups is that we have the freedom and flexibility to like fix things fast or to like change things up or like iterate faster than like big beauty conglomerates because we don't have all the red tape. So like don't just strive to be perfect. Like know that it's going to change. So just go. Like I wish I would have started sooner, honestly, when the fundraising bubble was like ballooning. But we did what we had to do when we had to do it. So it all worked out.
Do you feel like fear was a factor in you not hitting go prior to kind of the realization post your grandfather passing?
Yeah, I think like I was fearful. I think like the scariest thing was not feeling like I had a safety net anymore because when I launched Moodeaux, I was still working a full-time job, sure, but we had spent so much money like in this thing and like I was scared that if I didn't launch it, like if we just waited, then like I don't know, I just felt like I wouldn't lose any more money. Like I wouldn't lose any more time, energy just holding on to it. But like it's really quite the opposite. Like to make a return on that investment, you have to launch it. So I think like just feeling like
Right.
I didn't have a safety net, right? Crazy, crazy. Just feeling like I didn't have a safety net. And then also scared of rejection, right? Like, cause if you remember, like this all came about because I lost my job. Like I was laid off from what I thought was going to be it for me for the rest of my life. And so I didn't want to feel that type of rejection again of like being so passionate about something and it not resonating or it falling flat. But like I said, quite literally the opposite happened. We were instantly welcomed in the beauty community amongst our early adopters and retail partners alike. And Moodeaux is literally the best thing that has ever happened to me. And even though my grandparents, both of them now, are no longer here to see what I'm doing now, I definitely know that they're still here and they still have their hand in what's going on in the business. And, you know, we're proud to make them proud. And we're proud to make anyone who doesn't think that they can do this proud and enable them and empower them to feel like they can.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that they're proud of you. So, so you started to sell those initial units. Consumers got them post the pre-order and started to post about it and talk about it. How did you continue the momentum and just continue to build consumers? Were there any like major tactics that you felt were really the catalyst to keep it kind of growing?
Yeah, like I would say my first hire was our PR team because I just being in media, like having the unique understanding what editors and what press and media people are looking for, I knew that we were going to need to have a partner with us who could help spread the message and get us some like real true professional validation because I think it's a mix like great to have consumer validation but like the media is still very much so important, like especially to establish yourself. And yeah, like I hired my PR team, and it's crazy because I actually used to work for them when I was at another beauty startup. I was the content marketing manager at another company, and so I worked really closely with that PR team. And when it came time to kind of like venture out and do my own thing, I hit up the founder of that PR company. I was like, listen, I'm starting a fragrance company. Would you want to figure it out with me? And she was like, yeah. She was like, let's do it. And she hopped on board and We launched with press, which was also, I think, a big part of our strategy. We launched with the feature with Essence magazine, and we launched with the feature with Birdie. And from there, like the press just came. Like now we're over 350 press articles, Today Show, Good Morning America, all of that stuff. But like none of that would be a thing if like we hadn't planted the seeds and invested in like that early. So PR was really important. Our consumers, influencers, content creators important. And then retail. Like retail is really important in our early journey. We like signed our first retail deal 5 months after we launched, but we didn't launch with that retailer until the following year. But we had the deal in place like 5 months after Moodeaux launched in October 2021. And like that wouldn't have been made possible if we didn't have the community in our back pocket, didn't have the PR and the press and the accolades in our back pocket, because literally what started that conversation with our first retailer was like, hey, we keep seeing you everywhere. What's going on? Like, we want to figure like can you want to talk to us about this?
Yeah,
Like
you're the
we're
hottest brand. We
really
need you in our store.
yeah, they're like, well, what's going on? We know you just launched. Like, is retail on your radar yet? And quite frankly, it wasn't. But because we launched with that retail partner, it helped to establish again another layer of validity in the marketplace. And we launched with Credo, and I'll just share like Credo is our first retail partner, and they're the world's largest clean beauty retailer. We're a clean beauty fragrance brand, so for us, it's like no brainer to launch with a company that is a pioneer in that particular realm, but also like has set the standard really high for clean beauty. So for us, it was a strategic play. Perhaps were we not like ready for retail? I don't know. But we figured it out, and they've been great partners with us, and we've been with them since 2022. And yeah, I think like all of those factors really helped to establish Moodeaux into the brand that it is today, and it continues to drive our momentum.
So just backing it up to Credo and that 5 month and you saying you you honestly were not even thinking retail. Had you had a plan to be in retail at some point and it just wasn't, of course, in 5 months from launch, or were you initially thinking the brand was going to be solely D2C?
No, yeah, like we knew retail was very important. We have an experiential brand, and that there's only a certain amount of consumers out there who are going to be willing to blind buy anything. That's just fact. Some people are devout shoppers who go into physical retail spaces and love to try things for themselves. And with fragrance, it being so personal, you need to have an opportunity for someone to like do that. And D2C has its limitations, like, period. So we knew that retail was going to be a part of our strategy, but not as soon as it was. But I live by a philosophy of like, say yes, especially if it is in alignment with like your organization's like ultimate goals. Say yes and figure it out. Like, say yes and then figure it out in the process. Because also, like, being Black in retail, like, we don't get these opportunities every other day. Like, it's not every day that someone is knocking on a very young brand's door, inviting them into their space.
Yeah.
So for us, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'm gonna have this opportunity again. Like, let's try to figure it out. And Credo's been great in knowing that we're a startup and knowing that we have limited resources, but they also maintain a belief that like Moodeaux is really special. So partnering with retailers who understand your brand's vision, your product's philosophy, like how you're reaching customers, even if you're not reaching the millions and the masses yet, but like have an understanding of how you're going to drive sales for them and with them. Like those are all very key things that Credo and I talked about, Credo and Moodeaux talked about. So it just was a thing that I was like, you know what? Let's just try to figure it out. And to be honest, we're still figuring it out. Like we're still figuring out all of this stuff. All of this stuff. Every day it's something new. But yes, to your point, to your question, retail has definitely always been a part of our strategy.
Yeah. So when they reached out, what were early connection and conversation look like?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent in accelerators, grants, programs, all of that stuff. So we actually were a part of the Clean Beauty Summer School hosted by Tower 28. Tower 28 is a pioneering cosmetics brand for sensitive skin. They're in Sephora, they're in Credo, they're in all these different places. They're amazing. And every summer they host a summer school for clean beauty brands to learn all about how to do this thing, how to do business. And we got into the program after applying previously. Like we applied twice. Was it 2 or 3 times? Twice, I think. And we got into the program and we had a chance to learn from so many different people across so many different like business like categories, if you will, like finance to like product development to like supply chain and retail. And we had a chance to actually hear from Credo during that program. And it was like towards the end of the program, and there was an email introduction facilitated from Tower 28 and to Credo and us, and it was like, hey, like Credo wants to know more about you. Y'all take it from here. So Credo had learned about us through Tower 28, really enjoyed some of the things that we were talking about within the program and wanted to learn more. We had an initial conversation, and like I remember like that initial conversation being like, we're not even launched yet. Like we haven't even launched the brand yet. Like I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, can I just get to launch? And then after we launched, when those 5 additional months passed, they're like, we see you launched and we see you're doing, it seems as though you're doing well. Like we see you in the media, we see your socials. Like, do you think you'd be ready to have another conversation? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And then that's when like it really came to fruition, from there. So just like with any partnership, date these people first. Like I feel like I was dating Credo. We had our little first date, second date before we decided to like really do this thing. So although we were really excited about entering retail as a young brand, I did want to make sure I at least really assessed what that relationship could and would look like. And also like assess like the financials associated with retail, because it's one thing to say that you want to be in retail, but it's another thing to be like, oh, wow, this is very expensive. Do I have the supply chain that could support this? Do I have partnerships with 3PLs and warehouses? Do I have all of that like systematically like sound
Right.
or no? So like I said, we figured out a lot as we went along, and it's working to this day.
What were kind of the aha things that maybe you didn't know, but you learned as you were kind of from the time that, that 5 months out until you were launching with them that year later? What are kind of the big things that you're like, I had no idea that this is something I needed to do or I needed to have in place in order to be able to launch on time and make it successful?
I would say producing inventory at larger volumes was something that I didn't quite understand, because once you're there in retail, the goal is to really do sales well. And I remember the day we launched with Credo, we were the number one fragrance SKU because we launched with one SKU. We were the number one fragrance SKU that day, like the entire sales day. Like we really killed it that first day. And we continued to do well our launch month, and then came the second order. And I'm like, oh, we got inventory for that, right? Like, yeah, okay, like, okay. But then came the third order, and then the fourth, and then they started to grow in volume, and it's like, okay, 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 okay. Let's take a step back, because can we support this? Can we support these purchase orders while also still having the inventory that we need to sell on our site? Because when you sell at retail, there could be a chance that you're giving them a discount. And I say could be, like very strong could be, which means like, yeah, you're going to be discounting your products in retail, right? Like, however the discount is whatever you negotiate or whatever, but like you're not getting 100% of the sale anymore. And so naturally you want to make sure that you have enough inventory for you to sell on your own, because you are going to get 100% of that sale and have 100% of the margin. So it was like a learning experience, a really quick learning experience of making sure that we had enough inventory, also that we could sustain creating and producing newness for them and for us. So it's a lot. Like I could talk to you for 30 hours about literally everything I've learned, and we're still learning. I don't think anyone ever stops learning. Even the most seasoned professionals who are in business, who've been in retail in particular for so many years, know that like at any point something else could happen that forces you to get creative to come up with a solution or whatever. So no one's ever not learning. I think like having sound advisors who can speak to some of these challenges, and then also again having a really good open door relationship with your retail partner to where you feel comfortable talking to them about some of the challenges that you're facing, all of that matters as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that consistent communication and conversation and transparency with your buyer is important to make sure you're on the right path, right? And that you're doing the right things to be successful. So those first days of those, stellar performance, what were you doing from a marketing perspective?
We were just really, again, that like bringing our community along. Like they were geeked. They were so excited when they were like, "What? Retail? What?" Like they were so excited. They were so excited and they went out and bought. They went out to support. And we launched with an exclusive. We launched with an exclusive with Credo. So we had created this beautiful like travel pouch because like our first SKU ever was a travel size oil perfume. So we created an exclusive orange, beautiful orange pouch. We had the white clear version on our site, but we had the orange with Credo, which is like, I don't know, people really like these pouches. And so in order to get that orange pouch, that like bright orange Moodeaux pouch, you
You had to
had to get
come
it
in the
at Credo.
store.
You had to come in that store or go on credo.com or whatever. You had to go there. So I think that that was also key to our strategy, launching with some sort of exclusive. Also, we were only available at Credo for like over a year plus. So if you didn't want to wait on our shipping, which isn't bad, but if you are more of an instant gratification person, like you had to go to Credo. So I think like just bringing people along the journey, giving them something new to shop that they can only get at your retail partners, and reminding them that if you truly want to support us, you have to shop. And like being really clear about it because and also like reminding them that like if you do not shop at this particular retailer that we're now in, there's a risk that we will no longer be there. And there's a lot of different ways that you can share that with your audience, but like we found that like being kind of transparent with them like made them feel like, "Oh, okay." Because we get a lot of people, I'm not going to lie. They'll DM the account or they'll email and they'll say like, "Where do you want us to shop this month? Like today? Like where do you want me to like do you want me to buy this on your website or do you want me to buy at Credo?" And I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I'm like going over to Credo. Going over to Credo, going over to Credo, go shop at Urban Outfitters, pick us up at 13 Balloon. Thank you, appreciate it. Like, there are some clients that we have that get it and who are like, where will my dollar make the most impact for your brand? And it's not always D2C. It's not always D2C when you're in retail. Sometimes it's like, please go shop with our retail partners so that we can prove ourselves and stay on shelf. So just like the air and the aura of like transparency has been key for us.
I think too, just to reflect on the exclusivity piece, I think it's super smart. Just being a merchant myself, that is something that retailers always look for because consumers now just shop. They shop online, they shop at
Mhm.
multiple retailers. There's really not a lot of loyalty like it was before. So having the opportunity to have a brand that even if it's one SKU within the assortment is exclusive and can only be shopped at that retailer just holds so much value and weight because you're garnering then that consumer to only shop at your retail space. So I applaud you for that. I think you did it with 13 Loon too, right? With having an
Yeah,
exclusive product. So I
yeah,
think
we
that's a
did.
great way to kind of drive those initial sales.
Yeah, I will say like that particular SKU, although like we phased out the like travel set because it was like a kit. Because also when we launched on our site, in order to buy the product, you had to buy the kit. There was no separating the pouch from the product. You had to buy it together. Which helped like increase the revenue we were receiving because they had to buy it together before we even allowed them to buy just a single like travel size item. Same with that Credo, you had to buy the kit. So we like immediately like padded sales, I guess, if you will, because like they were already spending $65 plus. But I also would say like that single SKU, like once we split up the travel set and they were able to buy the travel size oil pen and Worthy by itself, that SKU in particular is still a bestseller at Credo. Like Worthy in general is like our number one bestseller across like its alcohol-based formula and its oil-based formula, but at Credo in particular, like Worthy flies off the shelf, like flies. And I think it is in part due to the fact that that was the first thing that we ever introduced with them. It is a classic. They know it, they love it. So I think being strategic about how you're introducing your product assortment to your retail partners will ultimately like help to set you up for further and future success because once you have one great MVP product, people are going to try and trust you on the next one and then the next one. Like it's a great way to establish like credibility with them as well as like preserve your cash. We didn't launch with like 5 million things at once. I think that is the biggest mistake that new brands do is launch 1,000 things at one time when no one knows who you are and expect everyone to just buy everything. Like that is crazy. So taking it slow, again, we're in the long game. Taking it slow, like I think has also been great for us.
One SKU, one store, understand consumer, and then move and expand.
Yeah, you'll get a lot of data that way too. And that data, especially if you're able to like control the data set, it's going to make it so much more compelling to another retailer versus like you launch 30,000 things and like only two of them are moving. Like that shows that like you don't understand
The
how
customer.
to like it is you don't understand your customer, you don't understand like that retailer because not everything is for that retailer. Not everything should be for that retailer. Like if you want to create a curated assortment that is going to drive success for both you and them. So having a controlled data set that you can like really manage and like look at under a microscope, I think shows like competency within the retail landscape and it will help you to convince your next partner to take a chance on you.
So when you say next partner, how long until that next partner kind of came to be? And then when did you know it was right to add on a second retailer?
Yeah. Well, our second partner was through 13 Loon. And for us, we decided to partner with 13 Loon because there is a shared values that we can easily speak to. We believe in their mission of supporting Black entrepreneurs and providing spaces for us to uniquely shine. And they've partnered with great people who also maintain those same values. So for us, like that was a perfect opportunity for us. And then as far as like Urban Outfitters goes, Urban was technically our second. 13 Loon was our third, but Urban Outfitters came about. That was also a long game. You know, Urban Outfitters found out about us right when we launched in 2021, and they had also reached out, but we were nowhere ready for an Urban Outfitters. They reached out prior to us even launching earlier in 2021, I believe, if I remember correctly. But we were nowhere ready for that. And I remember, what was that, 2023, just reaching out again on a whim. Something just told me to reach out and just see how the temperature was in the water. And they're like, yeah, we've been watching y'all for since you launched. Like, come on down. And I'm like, what? Like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah, like we would love to bring you on. So I think also like not counting yourself out is an important thing that I learned, and continuing to nurture relationships. So like from 2021 to 2023, like that was again like us dating each other, checking in or whatever. And then Urban was a no-brainer because our audience is a younger audience, a millennial and Gen Z centric audience. I've long had an affinity for Urban Outfitters. I used to work at Urban Outfitters when I was in high school. So I know that retailer like the back of my hand. I respect that retailer for what it's doing in the beauty space. Fragrance is something that they're doubling down on and wanting to prioritize as far as like growing their beauty vertical. So it was like a lot of these things were just no-brainers for us. And we decided to make the calls when we made the calls when we felt like operationally we could sustain growth in that way, but also like us understanding like our strategy, right? Like we just have to be in retail doors. There's only a certain amount of people who are going to blind buy like across the internet. And we really prioritize giving people a chance to try us before they like commit for real, for real. So yeah, I think these things just kind of came. And as a startup, like we're building the plane and flying it at the same time. I am building this plane and flying it at the same time. And sometimes you just gotta say yeah. Like, and I say yes to most things that I say no to in the earlier days. Now I'm saying no more because we need to respect our partnerships. We need to respect our team. We need to respect like what we have the capacity to actually do. But in the earlier days, I was saying yes because I truly felt as though we could figure it out. And
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah, I think too, just the fact that every retailer that you've, have your product in, there's intentionality in it, it sounds like. And definitely you understanding the connection of your consumer to that brand versus, just saying yes to any retailer that maybe doesn't fit your customer, where they want to shop, their demographic, like what makes sense to the mission of your brand. So I think that that's a valuable kind of gem too for people to understand and identify is that you say yes and figure it out, but you need to
Yeah.
make sure that it still is aligned to where you want your brand to be and what it represents.
Absolutely, because I think like again today's consumer is very very smart. And not to say that they weren't consumers weren't smart before, but when I say smart, I mean like really tuned in to what's going on out here. Like they can really read between the lines here. And how is it that you can say as a brand that you're intentional and you're purposeful and then do a whole bunch of non-intentional, non-purposeful things? Like it doesn't add up for them, and especially when it comes to retail, like it will just be a waste of time, energy, money, resources if like you're not maintaining that same level of like consistency and like across your values. Like it just won't make sense to anyone. So yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, and they see that. I mean, to your point, they're definitely a lot keener on seeing what's real and what's not
Yeah,
in
and
today's
they'll
world.
talk about you. They'll talk about you. Like we got TikTok, we got Instagram, we
Oh
got
yeah,
Twitter.
right.
Like, so
They'll call you
yeah,
out.
they
They'll
can
call you out.
listen. Right. So it's like, don't be afraid for people to like think that something's going on. They're gonna also like call you out on it. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
really be careful out here, okay?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so with product in stores, just to touch on the packaging and the bright colors, and definitely something that's attractive and drives the consumer eye. Is that something that was created prior to you being on retail shelf, and you had to change in order to do that and feel like you needed to stand out, or did it originate from the onset of the brand launch?
Yeah, we've always been a very bold brand. Like how our logo in particular has been designed, it is designed to like immediately grab your attention. How the logo appears on our packaging, it takes up the most space on the packaging, which we are revisiting, but the intention of that is to subconsciously remind our target audiences that it's okay to take up space and claim your space. It's okay for us to take up space in the beauty industry. It's okay for us to be bold and loud and colorful and bright and audacious. It's okay. Like literally on the packaging, there's a line that says proudly Black woman owned. Like we are really really loud about our brand's positioning, and that's something that I think has aided the retail experience. Whereas a lot of brands like I feel like we're like exiting this realm, but a lot of brands, I would say in the early 2010s and in the 20 teens, were like minimal. I want beige and cream and black and white and gray. And we still do see a lot of that today, don't get me wrong. But like that can get really boring really quick. And you could also get really lost in the sauce if like you want to maintain that same like visual aesthetic that a lot of people are utilizing, because when you go to retail, whereas like that is a now an uncontrollable environment, like you can only do so much, that also homogenizes the client's experience, and they will overlook you more times than not. If they didn't come into the store looking for you, they will overlook you because like everything is just so homogenized. Like they're just like, I don't even know where to look. So for us, like I think our packaging design and colors and just branding in general, like has been a breath of fresh air to some people who are like looking for like the anti of all of that like beige, cream, white, gray, black situation. They're looking for like something that like is lively, more lively. But don't get me wrong, like our bottle is clear with a black top and a black screen print, but whatever. But the boxes themselves are really bright and colorful so that they pop on shelf. And I think it's lended itself to like success in retail. But to be transparent with you, like our packaging needs to evolve. It needs to include more indicators of what the product smells like it needs to include perhaps more education, there's always room for improvement, but I will say like early feedback from our retail partners and like customers who've gone into retail stores to shop us has been like, I immediately knew where you were. I immediately was drawn to you and curious, and I understood the coloring system that you've assigned to your packaging, and I feel good about my purchase because of some of those things. So I think that also has worked.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think the color draws the eye in and it allows people to kind of explore based on that, right? Well, you're, like to your point, you're staying different, you're a differentiator kind of on the shelf from everybody else. When you talk about additions being made to the packaging, speaking to, scents and a little bit more information, is that from customer feedback? Is that from your buyers' feedback? Like, where did that originate from?
I think it comes from various places. I think like we're always trying to find more ways to like be more efficient because we also know that like people's attention spans are short just in general. We're living in a very digital era, and like by the time they get to a retail store, like while some people do browse and take their time, there are others who are just like overwhelmed with choice and just want to be able to make a faster purchasing decision, but an intentional one at that. So I think we're just always just trying to find ways to just be what people want us to be. Like removing ego, removing what we think will work or what we think is the prettiest, and really relying on the data. And I think with us as a brand that's like rooted in feelings, moods, and emotions, we know that color theory is a thing. Like we know that certain colors represent certain things and represent certain ways in which people perceive things. We know that orange is a color that is sparks creativity and represents a more energetic, lively brand, whereas blue is a very like it's a color that represents trust and reliability, whereas green perhaps speaks to an eco-conscious consumer, or there's a lot of like data out there that you can like lean into when deciding how to design your packaging. And for us, it just made extra sense because that's what we do with our products. Like that's how we design our scents. That's how we design our, you know, like our fragrances, right? So it would just behoove us to like do something like that. Whereas like it may not work for every brand. Like some
Right.
brands, which I really, really love, like there's a lot that I'm out here looking at all the time. Like some brands have like five colors that are true to their brand. They pick those five colors, they just reiterate on them, and like that's their thing. Like that's how they've established brand identity. For us, like we use a rainbow. Like some brands, like the Hailey Biebers of the world who have like Rhode or whatever, like that neutral palette works for them. Or like Kylie Cosmetics, which is like pink, or Brown Girl Jane, which is brown and pink, which I love Brown Girl Jane. Shout out to them. They're another fragrance brand. Or, like it varies, right? But I think for us, like intentionality was just like a core driver for how we made those packaging decisions. And like I said, we're always looking to like implement feedback, and like find better ways to serve our clients.
Yeah. No, that's great, and it's ties into everything. Like we were talking, even from you creating the plan of what the scent is going to be. It sounds like everything, of course, is super intentional. So, as you're going into kind of Q4, what does that look like for Moodeaux? I mean, I would imagine this is the busiest period of the year. What things are you adding to the assortment, or marketing tactics that you're putting in place in order to drive performance? Number one, and then number two, how are you leveraging driving consumers into store coupled with having that D2C performance when it comes to holiday?
Yeah, holidays fun. Like, don't get me wrong, holidays taking me out. It's taking me out. It's taking me out. I'm so tired already, but just as excited, like we are really, really stoked to have just now introduced our new like holiday bundles and sets. We just like turned over the site. So it's holiday like central on the site right now. Like that's been really fun to kind of see how people are reacting to it. We are going to be doing a lot more like pop-ups and like in-store activations. Like that's also really important for us still because like as an earlier brand, like an early stage brand, like it's important to still have boots on the ground. Like I never want anyone to feel like Moodeaux is unattainable or like is this big thing that it isn't yet, which God willing, we'll get there, right? We'll be big. But even when we're big, like I still want to maintain that boots on the ground feel where like I'm never too shy or never too good to like do a pop-up and connect with our audience face to face and like tell them our story and like invite them to choose their mood with our fragrance assortment. So like holiday pop-ups and select in-store activations are important. What else do we got going on? Yeah, I mean, I think how like how we've turned over the website and then like in-store and like physical like spaces, like taking over physical spaces is important. Like we never want to cannibalize our D2C, right? So there's certain things that like we have that our retail partners don't have. And then as far as like retail, there's like certain days in which that we've scheduled to go in and educate the sales staff and like, do fun giveaways and gift with purchase and all that stuff. So like having boots on the ground and then having really like a really pointed sales strategy, I think will carry us through holiday. But it's the best part, like out of all of that, I want to really double down on like the best part for me is like meeting with people face to face and like helping them like find something that they find joy in or like having them put us on to having put their friends on to us, right? Like that's the funnest part. Like so I'm excited to do some markets and such in this year and some like really fun activations. We have a commercial coming out like with a media company. We're really excited. That's going to do really good things for us in Q4. Press, all that kind of stuff. So we're really excited.
Lots more amazing things.
Yeah.
So, what is next? What's next for the business? Like, what do you envision Moodeaux, over the course of the next couple of years in regards to growth?
Yeah, like I think like the biggest goal of mine for 2024 was to just get out of my own way in terms of like shedding ego because I realized like a lot of the early decisions that I was making were ego driven like in terms of like growing the company and that I was still too focused on trying to prove everyone wrong and like was still hurt by losing my job in 2018. Like I think as like business owners and founders, like addressing that is important because if you do not address that, it's going to stifle your growth. Not only just as a person, but it's going to stunt your business's growth. There's going to always be a cap to your potential when you're doing things for vanity metrics or you're doing things for others. And so like this year was just like I'm shedding ego, I'm shedding all of that stuff. I'm going to grow my team, I'm going to hire people, I'm going to get help. And that's like what we did. So we grew our team this year and it's going to really be helpful just in the immediate, right? But also next year we have a really 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 big year planned. And so I'm excited to have more hands on deck. We have new things coming out, new partnerships to announce. So I'm really excited for the years to come, but in particular this year, it was just really about like getting the framework in a better place. Because I think that by year one or year two for early stage startup, like those early years are all about proving product market fit. Like you need those like really formidable years to understand if what you're doing is actually viable. And like after that's passed, assessing like, is this a venture that we should continue putting money in? Like you need to have those different points of inflection. And like we've done that work, we've done that internal, kind of like assessment. And like we are like extra confident that like Moodeaux is on a trajectory to doing good things. And so we're really excited for the years to come.
Excited too. And I would love to, you know, everyone listening know kind of where they can buy your product, how we can continue to support you and follow you on this journey that you're being so transparent and open with your community on. So what are all the ways that we can connect with you and your brand?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to say the first things first, like Moodeaux.com. Go on there and browse around and look around and whatnot. I would say Moodeaux.com is like the first place. Second, you can find us on social at Moodeaux Official. On Instagram, that's like our primary channel, but we're also on Facebook at Moodeaux. We're also on Threads as Moodeaux Official. We like sunset X or Twitter, like we've sunset that channel, but we still are there. You can find us on Pinterest at Moodeaux. So we're on most major social platforms, Instagram being our like number one like community hub. You could also find us at Credo Beauty online and in stores. We're in 13 out of their 15 doors throughout the country. So we have a store locator on our website. We're also available at Urban Outfitters online and indoors this holiday season. A few
Nice,
doors,
congrats.
I'm excited. And then 13 Loon, of course, online. They also have their flagship store in Larchmont, the Larchmont Shopping District in Los Angeles, California. You can find us on Scentbird if you're a Scent Birdie, if you're like someone who's subscribed to that platform and prefers to like sample fragrances that way. We're on Scentbird. And I think that's like the main. And then me, I mean, if you care, I'm Brianna Arps on Instagram. Like I'm always there, being a chatty Cathy. I like run my mouth on Instagram.
I'm always there. I think that's great. I mean, honestly, it's no excuse for us not to go out and buy Moodeaux. There are lots of different locations and places. So definitely look forward to being able to support during the holiday season, and of course the forward from a forward perspective too. So I appreciate you, Brianna. I think this is it was a fun conversation, and I think it was just really great
Yes.
in learning. I think a big takeaway I think for entrepreneurs is the fact that like you can take your time. We are today in a world of this like microwave, like,
Mm-hmm.
acceleration, and you don't have to do that. And it's a way in which if you're slow and you're intentional, to your point, and you've said this a couple of times, and I think it's definitely hopefully set in for people, is that it allows for a longevity of a brand. You know what I mean? You're able to really play the long game and really sustain and be out there in a really important way.
Yeah, I'm really like really honestly thankful for today's conversation. Some of which things that I hadn't thought about in a second, which I'm like, oh, like I remember that, and like it's always great to kind of like look back and celebrate where you've grown and where you've come. I think as entrepreneurs, like it's really hard for us to take a beat and just be proud of some of the things that we've done. Of course, but still with humility, right? So I appreciate today, and I'm really excited to stay in touch with you and your audience. And I look forward to hearing more stories on your podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much.